Hey readers and writers, today we are moving on to research question 3, and this one's all about consumers. So the first thing that we need to do is take out our ELA notebooks and write down the definition of consumers. So a consumer is an organism that gets its energy from eating other organisms. So this ties directly into the producers we talked about yesterday. Sometimes consumers are eating producers. Sometimes consumers, according to the food chain, are eating other consumers. So take a moment now. We're going to pause the video, take out your ELA notebook, and write this definition down. Press play when you're ready. Go ahead. Okay, so you should have the definition of consumers already in your notebook. So consumers are organisms that get their energy from eating other organisms. Today you are going to be searching for consumers in your ecosystem. So this research question 3, who are the consumers in this ecosystem? How do they obtain what they need to survive and reproduce? That is what we're going to be focusing on. So this graphic organizer looks pretty much the same. The only thing that has changed is shelter. We are now looking for what is the shelter of these consumers. So I'm going to give it a practice with my ecosystem, Antarctica. So I have a couple of pieces of an article from a website that I found here. I'm not going to read through these articles word by word because it is not your ecosystem necessarily, but I want to show you how I'm looking for some key words. So temperature. Well, first of all, the first thing I did is I went back to my research question 1 and I checked out the animals section and I looked for different animals or consumers that I had pulled out there. The first one I wrote down was penguins. So I decided my first consumer is going to be a penguin. So in this section here, I have a couple of keywords that I had found. Warm-blooded, blubber, and fluffy down feathers. So this is talking about how penguins have adapted to the temperature, how they deal with these cold temperatures. So I picked out they are warm-blooded, they have a layer under their skin called blubber, and they're covered with a layer of fluffy down feathers. All of these things keep them warm. So what I did in my graphic organizer, and this here should say consumer, what I did in my graphic organizer was write warm-blooded, fluffy down feathers, and I can add blubber as well. So that I put under other adaptations because that's not how they're getting energy or nutrients. That's not how they're getting their water. That's not what they're living in or what they're sheltered under. So the next article that I found, here are my keywords underlined here. I saw the heading is dinner time. It says penguins eat seafood with a main diet of fish, squid, and krill. So that to me falls under energy and nutrients. You're going to find that for consumers, these two columns are essentially the same thing. So they eat seafood. This includes fish, squid, and krill. I also noticed here there's an adaptation. It says if you look closely at a penguin's bill, you'll notice a hook at the end, perfect for grabbing dinner. They also have backward-facing bristles on their tongues that help slippery seafood get from getting away. Down here it says they drink salt water. They don't live near fresh water, at least none that isn't frozen, so they drink salt water and have special glands in their bodies that take salt out of the water. So that's pretty interesting. It says it's an in-house filtration system. So here, in my graphic organizer, again, this should say consumer up here, under water, I wrote they have special glands to take the salt out of water. That's an adaptation that they have in order to get what they need from their environment. In terms of nutrients, they eat seafood, shrimp, krill, fish, and squid. They have backward-facing bristles, and I can add here they have a hooked beak as well in order to really help them catch their prey. Nutrients and energy are essentially the same thing for our consumers here. So feel free to write this information in just one of those columns instead of both. So the next thing I have here, this heading is where do penguins live? And as I read through, this was giving me information about the ecosystem, which that I already know. But down here, I noticed that it said penguins always live beside the sea where they can get their food. And 80% of their life is in the water or several months during the year in the ocean. So that's not a lot of time living in a shelter, but I did see they use icebergs as places to rest. So in my organizer, Under shelter, I said beside the water, use icebergs as a resting place. So and then I wrote down my source here. All of this information has come from nationalgeographic.com. So the last thing I needed was, what do they give back to the environment? So this piece of the website here says they do more than make us smile. They play important roles in their ecosystem. So here I underline they serve as food, and they carry nutrients for other consumers. So in my last column here, I wrote serve as food to other animals and carry nutrients. So notice how I picked out one animal, one consumer, and I worked to fill out every column before I moved on. So we are focusing in one consumer at a time. You can check the front board. I have a list of different search keywords that I used. So you'll see those written up front. Things like penguin shelter, penguin facts, penguin food, that kind of stuff, to really hone in my search, and make sure you write down your source for anything that you do. So keep in mind your expectation for tomorrow. Here's your writing rubric. This will be your third writing assignment tomorrow. We're looking to find 3 key details, explanations for each, strong introduction, strong conclusion. So that will be coming tomorrow. The more you have in your graphic organizer, the better off you will be. So today, in your research, use 1 to 2 books before you switch over to a website. Write down as much as you can, even if it's just information about one animal. As you're reading, make sure you're flagging important information in your text. That's going to really help you fully understand and complete research question 3. Write information down. Don't just read and let it go. And don't just write things down from your head. This is research-based. The more you have on your paper, the better. Cite all your sources in research question 3 and the works consulted pages. Once you finish with your 1 or 2 books, depending on your ecosystem, you may move on to 2 to 3 websites to finish up your research. So I look forward to seeing what kind of consumers we find in our ecosystems. Happy reading and happy writing.